My name is George Siantonas. I've long, for many years, been inspired by TED Talks and some of the videos that we all see up there. And I'm very happy and very pleased today to be able to make a small contribution to the great community that is TED. Thanks very much, Alex. Okay. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the challenges of virtual working in a digital world. So it's very appropriate that I can welcome you to Brighton today, because not only is Brighton a beacon of equality in all its forms, as we heard from a previous speech, despite what some right-wing newspapers have to say, but it's also the place which has the highest density of digital companies of anywhere in the UK. And whilst Silicon Valley may well be in California, Silicon Beach is right here in Brighton. So I prepared some slides for you, which I hope will add some visual emphasis to the points that I'm going to be making. The shape of my speech, as you can see here, is I'm going to talk a little bit about what it's like to work in a virtual way, and give you some sort of idea of what that might be like. I'm going to talk a bit about knowledge work and the knowledge economy. We hear a lot about the knowledge economy. I'm going to talk about what knowledge is, and briefly describe two different types of knowledge, tacit and explicit. Talk a little bit about how knowledge is constructed in social groups, and tell you a little story about engineers working for the Xerox Corporation, which has become a classic in the literature. I'm going to also talk about the importance of collaborating and sharing knowledge in virtual teams and some of the challenges associated with that. And then I'll draw things together with a summary and conclusion in about 15 minutes' time. So, firstly, what is it like to work in a virtual team? Well, imagine that we're part of a multinational corporation working in a virtual team, some of us in London, some of us in New York, some of us in Sydney, Australia. And we're probably using, for sure, we'll be using technology with which to communicate, and probably using a range of software tools. We may well be using for social media something like Yammer, which is a Facebook-like environment where people can share photographs and other personal items. We're probably using some form of instant messaging, maybe Google Hangouts, maybe Adobe Connect, probably Skype, possibly, to make sure we can reach people wherever they may be in our organization around the world. And we'll probably be using some form of team communication tool, perhaps Slack or Squiggle. And really what it's like is that when the people in London finish their working day, they hand the project over to the people in New York who are just beginning their working day. And they run with the project, and then when they're done, they hand over to the people in Sydney, Australia. So it's a bit like a relay team, with the project as the baton. And at the end of each working day is like the end of the lab for that particular team working in that particular location. And just like a relay team, there's a little bit of a handover to ensure a smooth transition from one to the other. And of course, unlike a relay team, this goes on 24/7, which is why many organizations today have the, perhaps it's the benefit, some people might think otherwise, of being able to work around the clock, which is what's happening in today's economy. So that's what it's like working in a virtual way. But the question that I really want to address is virtual working just about technology? For sure, access to advanced technology has enabled people to interact together much more effectively than they have been in the past. But what about issues associated with trust, culture, communication, and language differences? those are the real questions that I think we need to address. And these are the things that really interest me. So what about the knowledge economy? Let's have a look at some of the things that exist in the world of virtual working. The number of remote employees in the US has gone up by 80% since 2005. So the world is changing, the world of work is changing, and changing quickly. Over 3.5 million people currently work in remote teams in the US. And we see this phenomenon around the world more and more as more and more organizations are adopting a remote work culture. So in the knowledge economy, companies are more like social communities with people interacting often virtually to generate and share and transfer knowledge. So it's more important that organizations recognize the need to do this, because often the people that are collaborating with each other across space and time don't even work for the same organization. So, what is knowledge? Well, knowledge can be broadly categorized into two areas, tacit and explicit. And knowledge is seen by many people as being probably the only real source of competitive advantage in the knowledge economy. And what we mean by tacit knowledge is that it's embedded within individuals, often in their minds, in their brains, and we saw a couple of videos and had some talks earlier about this kind of thing. And there's also explicit or hard knowledge. This is knowledge that people have recorded, codified, and can be retrieved. Some examples of hard knowledge, the sort of thing you might find in an employee handbook, for example, or a process flowchart that somebody has created, or a product manual. Examples of soft knowledge, tacit knowledge are, well, you will not be able to play Hey Joe by reading the chords in a book. You won't play the guitar like Jimi Hendrix just by reading the chords. You won't be able to ride a bike just by reading a book about it. And the same goes for dancing the tango. More about that later. So, I now want to tell you a little story about these guys. These guys are the subject of a study by a guy called Julian Orr called Talking About Machines. They are Xerox engineers, and their job was, still is, to fix copying machines. And when they joined the corporation, they were each given a manual and sent out into the field, go fix machines. The problem was that when they actually got to a machine with a fault, and they opened it up to have a look inside, what the manual was telling them was not appropriate to the situation in which they found themselves. So the problems they encountered were not able to be resolved simply by relying on the manual. So what did they do? Well, during the working day, perhaps at lunchtime, maybe at the end of the day, they would gather together, maybe in a coffee shop, and they would talk about these things. They would discuss the issues that they'd encountered, share their stories, share their thoughts, concerns, and in that way develop new knowledge, improvise solutions to the problems that they encountered. And this particular study has become, as I say, a classic case study in the knowledge management literature. Why? Well, what this shows is that knowledge is embedded within individuals and inseparable from practice. What we mean by practice is what people do. It's what they actually engage in, what they're passionate about, what they care about, what they share with other people. So we can see that it's in a way socially constructed. And the form of social constructivism is the way in which knowledge is generated within these communities. These informal gatherings enable people to create a common understanding of what they were dealing with in a way that you couldn't find in a book. They had a shared map of where the machines were, what the machines' problems were, and they each had their own unique identity, which enabled them to contribute to the collectively held knowledge base of the whole group. In effect, a community of practice, a community of practice. Community means people with shared values, shared beliefs, shared language, coming together about something about which they care. And by so doing, they were able to resolve these problems. And the really interesting thing, apart from the points I've already made, is Xerox thought that the job was a very solitary job, and there would be very little opportunity for interaction. And yet the engineers found the time to do that. Why? Because they cared about what they did. And as a result, they improved their own personal standards, and they improved their professional standards for themselves and engineers that joined in the future. So, challenges of virtual working are associated with this issue of soft knowledge. Hard knowledge lends itself to the capture, codify, store approach, whereas socially constructed knowledge is much more difficult, not easy to capture at all. Why? Because real knowing comes from participation in communities, as I've said. And trust is the key to this. Why did the engineers share their knowledge with others? Why was one person able to give freely of his knowledge, her knowledge? Why? Because he believed, she believed that there'd be reciprocation. They trusted each other. And this is the dilemma of many knowledge workers, this hoard-share dilemma. Do I give of my knowledge and risk undermining my position, making myself vulnerable, losing a little bit of exclusivity? Or do I share my knowledge because I believe genuinely that's the right thing to do? Well, it's largely a case of perception. Do people perceive there will be negative consequences of sharing? If that is the case, they won't. But if they believe that there will be positive consequences, they'll be more motivated to do so. So this comes to an issue to a certain extent of rewards. Rewards, as we know, fall into two categories, broadly, intrinsic and extrinsic. And intrinsic rewards are genuinely found to be more powerful than simply pay, providing pay is at the right level. And by intrinsic, it could be that the job is challenging. The job has meaning to the individual. And by achieving the goals associated with that job, it may be a bit of a stretch, but I've made it, one builds self-esteem and also derives kudos from having done the work effectively from his or her colleagues and management. I'm not saying financial incentives aren't important, of course they are, but deep down, intrinsic rewards are often more powerful. So it's important that people have a sense of identity with the team they work for and within and the organisation. This leads to a greater sense of commitment and also helps the organisation to retain key staff, because in a knowledge economy, people with the knowledge, when they walk, it damages the organisation. So this sense of identity, just as Xerox engineers had, generates a willingness to participate and becomes an important aspect of what leadership should be about in these kinds of organisations. It's the fostering of a culture which encourages collaboration and interpersonal relationships. How do we do that as organisations? Well, first of all, hiring the right people. The right people means having people with the right sets of attributes associated with the nature of the endeavour. So values need to be compatible. We're looking more at values rather than skills, because skills can be learnt and skills can become redundant, but values are deep-seated. Also characteristics, and research has shown, these guys here, Cabrera, Muradin and Matzler, did some research which shows that these characteristics, openness, agreeableness and conscientiousness, lend themselves more readily to a knowledge-sharing environment. Other important features here are the job itself needs to be challenging, meaningful, high autonomy, opportunities to continue to develop knowledge and skills, and involvement in decision making. And you find in creative companies, like the ones in Brighton that I referred to, and also Google and places like that, the kind of people that work there value these things above all else. Training is important too. Better make sure people can use the technology, because without being able to use it, the technology itself becomes a source of frustration and people are demotivated. Also training in interpersonal skills, very important so people can develop relationships with each other across geography. Coaching is important. And mentoring is important because it underlines the culture of sharing. The way to manage these communities is with a light touch, nurturing them rather than supervising them, giving them autonomy, and being quite informal about it. When organisations do that, and there's research showing that there is a strong link between innovation and this kind of community culture. COP is community of practice, by the way. So benefits are that they solve problems quickly, transfer best practice, develop professional skills, help and recruit talent, and above all, they enable people to share values, attitudes, language, stories and jargon, as I said earlier about the Xerox engineers. An example here of an open source community is Apache. Apache is a form of software. People can join the community, lead the community, work on this project, work on that project. They choose. It's free and open, and it's very successful. Another example of a firm-based community practice is Caterpillar. Over 70,000 employees and over 3,000 communities of practice. Very successful organisation working in this collaborative way. So let's return to the original question. Is it more than just technology? Well, the early days of digital technology focused on the efficiency aspects and automation, the codification of explicit knowledge, very poor at tacit knowledge, and wasn't able to work with that kind of thing. Nowadays, advances mean that technology can be much more collaborative. So it's much more rich in the way within which people communicate, and getting closer to being able to simulate that face-to-face encounter. So just to wrap it up, is new wave digital technology a panacea? No, of course not. Sure, organizations need to be tech savvy, but they need to be people savvy as well. And develop and cultivate this culture that I've already referred to. Paradigms are shifting, people are working in different ways, organizations need to understand that people are coalescing around joint goals and forming these collaborative communities. And the digital world will continue to play its part in being able to do this, which brings me back to Brighton, where a lot of this work is taking place and will continue so to do. Thank you very much for listening.